Okay, we're going to do part 3 of the little browse products thing, and we're going to add comment boxes for when users are logged in. Okay, so underneath each item we're just going to add a text box, and we'll have a little rating drop down list as well, and a little button saying comment. Okay, so we're going to add that. So to do that, we're going to do that dynamically. So if you locate your display products subroutine where we add all our items on, before we add our div to the list of all the products, we're going to add some extra. So here's the bit where we add the image to the div we're creating for each item. Here's the text that we add to that. So we're going to do it just after there, but we're only going to allow users who are logged on to comment. Okay, so we're going to check our storage to make sure we've got a valid user ID. So as long as it's not equal to -1, because that's our invalid one, remember, then we're going to do the comments. So we're going to create a text box dynamically first. So we're going to say text box t equals new text box. Right, we're going to give it an ID, and this ID is going to be important, and we'll need this later. Okay, we're going to prefix it with tx, but then we're going to use the item's ID number. Remember, we're looping round each item from the database, so we can just say item ID. That was the name of my key field for item. Okay, that's what it needs to be, your key field for your items or your products or books or whatever it is you've got. Okay, I'm going to set a width for it. Again, you can do all this with CSS, but I'm going to just set a width of 200. Okay. If you want to set the multi-line thing, I think it's text mode. You can set text mode equals textbox mode dot multi-line. Okay, so what you can do is you can then say rows equals 2, so that'll display 2 rows from your text box. Okay, you don't have to do that, I've just shown you how to do that. So that's the text box created. We need to add it to our item div. So item div dot controls dot add t. Okay, now let's create the drop down box. So rating. So we're going to create a drop down list. I'm going to call it DD. New drop down list. And what we need to do with this is fill it up with items. So we do that quite simply by just saying items. Now my ratings are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, and then I'm just going to repeat that 4 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and change the numbers. So I've got a rating values 2, 4, 5, and by default I'm going to select 3. So I'm going to say dd.text equals 3. Okay, boop, in double quotes. Alright, I need to set an ID for this because I'm going to need to be able to look these things up later, and I'm going to have to do some fancy code to do it. So I'm going to say ID equals, I'm going to put DD in front of it, but I'm going to use the item ID again because I'm going to have loads of these drop down boxes. I'm going to have one for every single item, so I need to be able to distinguish between them. So I'm making the ID tied to the item number. Okay, right, once I've created it, I can add it to my item div. So item div dot control dot add dd. So the last thing I've got to create is a submit button. A little bit more tricky this because I want to run a subroutine. Okay, so let's just do the submit button. So submit our comment. So I'll create a button. That's the type of object. Call it B. New button. Set some text for it. So b.text and oops. b.text equals make comment. Right, set its ID, and again I'm going to use the same format. So I'm going to say b.id equals bt plus the item that this button, and again this is because I'm going to have loads of buttons generated, one for every single thing. Right, the next thing is to create the click event handler. So I'm going to say b.click, oops, I will do if I type properly, b.click plus equals, now it comes up with this tab. We're going to do this, we're going to say tab, and then if you press tab again, it'll create the handler for us. So let's give it a better name than b-click. Let's say it make comment. Okay, and we should just be able to press tab and it'll create make comment. Okay, so it's made it there. Did it really quick and jumped to it. Okay, so I just typed the name I wanted and pressed tab and it's created it. And let's just go back to our code so that we can add the button to our item div, and that'll be the last thing we've got to do there. Okay, and then we'll test that. So add B. Okay, so first off I checked, is there a user logged in? If there is, create a text box, gave it an ID that was related to the item that I'm displaying, created a drop down box, gave it a name related to the item I'm displaying, put some values in it, created a button, gave it an ID related to the item, and then I created a click handler, okay, which I renamed to make comment, which has been created here for us. So we can actually just run the browse code now and it should show us the text boxes and the buttons. Now if I run it like this, I just run the browse window. Okay, it came up eventually. Oh, what's he doing? Oh, stop running for some reason. Let's run it again. Don't know what happened there. Tricky. Okay, I'm currently not logged in. Am I not? So that's worked perfectly. So it's just showing the normal browse stuff. Let's go through the front end. So let's go to our home page, which is for me is default, and run from there and click browse once I've logged in. Now I've got a user called and I think the password is Daz. Right, I'm logged in. Okay, as Dave Bloke the third. So I'm going to now go to the browse page. Now I'm logged in, I should see all those text boxes. There you go. So I've got a text box over 2 lines, drop down box, defaults to 3, and a make comment button, which doesn't do much. Okay, so when I click that, it says not implemented exception, and that's there to remind me that it isn't in existence. So if I just look back at the web page, the text boxes are after the display of the date, which is a bit naff. So what I'm going to quickly do, stop my program running. I can delete that exception handler now. Okay, just delete that. Before I add these extra controls, after my date string, what I should add, well, I can do it on the next line. I can just say l.text plus equals a break tag, just to force the next thing that appears onto the next line. So if I just run my default again, just to show that that works, and then we'll get on and extract all the data. I'm going to log in, does browse products. There you go, that's a bit nicer. Still looks a bit naff, but not bad. Okay, right, let's create a click handler. Okay, let's do the code for it. Right, so in my browse code, make comment, let's go to that. Right, what I want to pick up is the text box value, the item number. Okay, so let's do that first. So the item ID, because I want to be able to make a comment, and see I've got this rating table where I've got item ID, I want to put the user in there, what they said and what rating they gave. Okay, so I need to relate it to an item. So I'm going to do this code and I'll type it out and then I'll explain how it's working, although you might be able to guess. Okay, what that does, sender is the object that ran this subroutine. For our case, it's a button. So what we do is we cast sender to a button. Then we put brackets around all of it because what we want to access is the property ID of sender. Okay, so we get its name. But we don't, what we want is the ID number of the product that we've just made a comment about. And we called our button plus, if we just look, item ID. So if we get rid of the BT bit, we should be left with just the item ID. And that's what the replace bit does. It says look for BT, replace it with nothing. So we should just get a string with that in. Okay. What we can then do is create a couple of strings to pick up the names for the text box. So I'm going to say text box ID equals TX plus item ID, because they didn't make this, the button ran this code for us, so it's from the button that we have to do all this. And we'll do a similar one for the drop down box. So the drop down ID equals what did I call it? DD plus item ID. Okay, right, what we now need to do, all those, the text box and the drop down and the button are all inside the same div tag, which was item div. What we want to do is get hold of that div tag. Okay, so we're going to say control, because it's the parent of the button, so button sender dot parent. Okay, oops, with a capital P is, oh, not put equals. Okay, so that gets hold of the div, and we're going to need that now because we're going to now loop through all the controls that are in the div to find the text box. Okay, before we do that, we're going to set up our comment to be blank and our rating to be a blank string. We'll keep missing equals, don't know why. Now, the reason they're both strings and the rating is a string is because the values from drop down boxes by default are text. Alright, and it doesn't matter for when we build our query later. Okay, so now we're going to search for the text box and its value, if we can find it. So we say for each, and we're going to say control C in parent dot controls. So we're going to loop through all the controls, that's a text box, labels, all those things, looking for one that's got the ID that's the same as our text box ID. Okay, and if we find that, we're going to pull, you have to cast everything, the text from the box and stick it in the string comment. Okay, what we're also going to do is clear that text box, because one thing you sometimes get on websites is what we call double post, where someone clicks a button and then clicks it again. Okay, so what we're going to do is try and stop that happening. So we're going to clear the text box after we've copied the value. Then we're going to do a break, and what that does is forces the loop to end. Okay, we're going to do exactly the same for the drop down box. So we're going to copy and paste this, and we're going to be very careful. So I've copied and pasted it, and I'm going to say drop down ID. Now this time I don't need that. I'm going to change rating. It's a drop down list, and it isn't the text we want, it is the selected value. Okay, so a little bit simpler than the text box one. So that dynamically searches the web page for controls that exist with specific names. Okay, now the last bit is to do the insert code. Alright, but I only want to do it if we've actually got a comment. So I'm going to just check comment first. So if something went wrong and we couldn't find the text box, we won't have a value for comment. Okay, right, I'm going to create a subroutine in my data code called add comment and rating, and I'm going to pass it the item ID, I'm going to pass it the comment, and I'm going to pass it the rating. It's going to pick up the user ID itself. Okay, so I don't need to worry about that. This doesn't exist, so I'm going to create that. Generate method. Okay, so let's just quickly look at what we've got here. We picked up the ID of the product from the button's name. We use that to create the name of the text box and the drop down that we need to look for. Set a default comment and rating. Got hold of the parent of the button. That's the div tag that everything was in. And then we searched through the div tag to find the text box, and if we found it, pulled the comment out of the text property. Did the same for the drop down, and now we've gone to create the query that's going to insert code into the table. So let's just look at that. So that's a standard insert command which we've done before. So SQL equals insert into. Now my thing's called rating, and I've got a horrible suspicion that that's a keyword. I don't know, I'm just not going to let it happen to me. So my thing here is called rating, and I'm going to insert into there item ID, user ID, comment, and rating. Leave a space at the end, and that's going to come from 4 parameters. So question mark, question mark, question mark. Okay, that's my query. Now I need to create my parameter collection. Parameter collection PC, just the same as we've always done. So I'm going to say pc.add new parameter question mark. Right, so the first one was my item ID, so that's type code int 32 because it's a number. Okay, and that was from my parameter that was passed to this subroutine called item ID. Right, I've got another 3 parameters to do, so I'm just going to copy and paste that. Right, the next one is user ID, and that's an int 32, but that comes from storage. So I'm going to look that up. Who is the current logged in user? And I have to make it a string. Okay. Right, the next thing is the comment. Now that's string. Okay. And that comes from the parameter comment. And the rating is a number. Oh, I could put int 32. Oops, I've got unsigned int there. Int 32, and that is rating. Now I don't have to convert any of those because they were already strings. Okay. Right, that last bit to do is to say execute insert SQL PC. Okay, so pretty standard code. So let's just recap what we've got, and then we'll see if it works. So we've got dynamically created text box, drop down list and button for every item with a unique name based on the item number. We pick that item number up, grab hold of the text box and the control, and then run our query. Let's just see if it works. It'll be a miracle if it does. So I'm going to put a comment, and then we'll add some extra code. Oh, I need to log in, don't I? So that's no good to me. So I'm going to go to my default page, default.aspx, log in as Daz, which is Dave Bloke, and I'm going to make a comment about Final Fight, and it is, oh, it's good. It's good. And I'm going to post my comment. Right, the text block's been cleared. Now we can't see anything about the comment, so let's just close this down and go back to our ratings table, and I'm going to now retrieve the data and see if that's in there. Eventually it'll chug and find it. There's a load of others in there, but I've got it's good for item 4 by user 2. Now item 4, if I just show you the item data, should be Final Fight. There you go, item 4 is Final Fight. If we, I don't know how long my video's been going because I forgot to start my clock, so I'll do another little vid after this one to show you how to display the ratings and comments. Okay, so that's the end of that one. So part 4 will show you displaying that stuff.